So welcome everybody, and thank you all for pitching up for this session today, and thank you also to the Film Education Journal for the opportunity to run this session. I'm absolutely delighted to have with me today four extremely experienced teachers from primary schools in Scotland who've had long experience of working with film education. One of the things about film education and a lot of the other sessions that we've had is that the film education in those contexts is something of a kind of special event. For these teachers who've been working with it for such a long time, it's very much kind of part and parcel of their normal work. It's kind of normalized and every day. So it's an opportunity to hear about that kind of experience. Apologies, as Jamie said, I've had tech issues today, so I'm not appearing before you in person, just my disembodied voice, which is slightly disconcerting, but hey, such is Zoom life. So I think we'll just get started. What I'm going to do is talk individually to each of the panelists in turn for about the first half of the session and get a sense of their experience. And then we'll open up for a kind of wider discussion across the four of us. And I'm going to start with Chiara Sportelli. Now, Chiara is seconded to the Forth Valley and West Lothian Regional Improvement Collaborative for Literacy Development. And for those of you who are not teachers in Scotland, a Regional Improvement Collaborative is an association of several local authorities looking at kind of strategic development of the provision of schools in the area. Chiara is working from them, seconded from Bannockburn Primary School in Stirling, where she's a principal teacher. She's been promoting moving image in the primary school for many years. So, Chiara, let's start with some questions. Could you give us a bit of a history, kind of where and how did film education start for you, and kind of why did it start? What kicked it off?
Thank you for that question, Scott, and good afternoon to everybody. I think my first experience of using moving image education was in my probation year. And I'm not quite sure what kicked it off exactly. It was just something that I wanted to do. I hadn't had any sort of input or training around it. And I started off by using a few scenes from the film The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. And we compared them to corresponding parts of the novel. As I say, I thought it would be an interesting thing to do in my own personal life outside of school. I'm quite sort of creative, into theatre and performing and things like that. And always try to bring elements of that into the classroom where it's suitable. So maybe that's why I went down this route. I had also been told by the school leadership team that I couldn't show more than a 10-minute block of the film at a time. And I suppose this was maybe my way of trying to get around that by showing short scenes and comparing it to the novel. It was very much a sort of literacy focus, thinking about visualization through the novel and then comparing that to the film. With that same class, I then accidentally ended up creating a film. We were doing a learning historical topic around the Jacobite uprising in Scotland, and we were discussing the various events, and somebody made a comment saying, "My goodness, this is like a soap opera," and we sort of just seized on that, and the class ended up creating a production company that they called Historical Hilarities, and that's really how we learned about the Jacobites. The class split into different groups and they carried out research in order to put their soap opera film together. So they researched clothing so that the group that were in charge of costumes could make costumes, the historical facts so that they could write the script, what life was like in Scotland at the time for the sets, which were repurposed parts of the school, and for the props. I think we filmed it all using a flip video camera, which I don't think even exists anymore. And then did some editing work, putting it all together. It was a really fun way of learning for the pupils and a really memorable experience for them. They all bought into it and they were totally engaged in the whole process, like nothing else that we had done during the year. Once our film was complete, sorry, I should go back and say that in order to really make the film, we talked about soap operas, we talked about their experience of soap operas, you know, to help them write the script and the style of the script. But even things like, I don't know, because I don't watch any soap operas nowadays, but back in the day, Emmerdale used to have the sort of rolling hills and the camera panning over the hills, and one of the children talked about that. So they went off and made paper mache mountains, which was the Scottish landscape, and then filmed that to go for the music as the opening credits of the film. Once it was done, we had an event for the parents, a film premiere with a red carpet, and we had an Oscar awards ceremony, so each child got an award for something relating to the film. It was more fun awards rather than best actor and things like that. And I would say it was only after that that I then went on to seek out training opportunities around moving image education. And in the years after that, I've developed my knowledge and skills and always made use of it. But that was how I got into it initially, way back at the start of my teaching.
No, great. And how's that kind of use developed over the years? How have you used it over the subsequent years? And how many years have you been using it?
I've been using it for about 12 years now. And I think initially it was very much a literacy-based focus, tying in, I would use it quite a lot even now instead of a written novel in the class. I found that I get a lot more out of learners by using a visual text rather than a written text, because it removes the barriers that some children have with written text. I've also used it as part of context conflict in World War II to really discuss and introduce the social aspects and cultural aspects of those time periods and the experiences that people go through who are experiencing conflict. We used the Save the Children video as part of our conflict context a few years ago, the one where it shows just a normal person in Britain living their normal life and they end up a refugee through a series of events. I think it's called something like The Most Shocking Day, and there's different parts to it, but that really brought it home to the learners that they're learning about refugees and countries where conflict is happening, but it really could happen anywhere. So that was a very powerful piece to use with them. And I've also used it linking to health and wellbeing context, and we've looked at food advertising and how they make food look appealing to the public in adverts, and also how stereotypes are presented in the media, adverts and films, and body image, and a whole variety really of uses. It's very powerful tool.
Yeah. So what outcomes have you seen for the pupils that you've worked with and teachers that you've worked with and other schools perhaps that you might have worked with in the collaborative?
I think in terms of outcomes, it really encourages critical thinking for learners. The work associated with moving image education encourages collaboration. Identifying different elements of film. I've done lots of work around that, especially doing extended films instead of a novel. We've used Warhorse tying into conflict which is an amazing film for moving image education. There's just so much in it. So appraising different elements of film and really understanding why the director has chosen those elements and how it all ties up and contributes to the overall meaning and the experience of the viewer. And again, linking to sort of your social and cultural knowledge of either experiences they can't have because it happened in the past, or experiences of people in different cultures and different countries, which without the power of moving image, they wouldn't be able to experience those in the same way. It really brings it to life for learners in a way that printed words on a page can't quite do.
And what about colleagues that you've worked with? Have you seen it spread from yourself or others into teachers that you work with?
I think I've seen more of the creative side used, where classes have made moving image clips and short films, animations, not so much the sort of analytical aspect of it, using it instead of a novel. When I've mentored probationers, I've always encouraged them to make use of moving image, especially tying it into literacy and comprehension work. But generally, I would say it's more the creative side that I've seen teachers using rather than using it as a text.
And how do they respond to
that? I think maybe they're a bit skeptical at the start. I think there's still this feeling that literacy and a text should be printed words on a page. I'm quite vocal about saying that that's not the case. And I think once people start to make use of moving image linking to literacy, they realise what a powerful tool it is. And as I mentioned before, it takes away a lot of the barriers to learning that some of our pupils experience when it comes to printed text. I've had experience of children who were dyslexic and really struggled with books. And if you were basing it only on that experience, you would think that maybe their comprehension wasn't that well developed. But using a moving image text, they absolutely blew me away with their interpretation of what they saw and the depth of their knowledge and their skills, which you wouldn't have got that from them if you had put a piece of written text in front of them.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that many teachers still see literacy as kind of words on the page, even though since 2004 or whatever, it's been written into the literacy in English principles and practice kind of guideline document.
Mm-hmm.
How would you explain that's kind of missing from some teachers' awareness?
I think the wording is still quite vague in the experiences and outcomes and associated documentation. Yes, it does mention visual text such as films, adverts, etc. But when you sort of drill down into the actual benchmarks and the experiences and outcomes, it's not quite as explicitly mentioned. It will talk about text and make reference to sort of characters, structures and settings. But tied into that, it talks about word choice, which would lead you to think it's talking about a written text rather than a visual text.
Yeah. Okay. And just last question before we move on to Mel. Have you experienced any kind of inspections picking up on, inspections from Her Majesty's Inspectorate, picking up on film education, moving image education?
Unfortunately, I haven't. In my teaching career, I've only experienced one inspection so far. I've moved schools, so I think I managed to dodge them. And when they came to observe me, they came to observe me doing numeracy. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to demonstrate that. They did mention that they had witnessed innovative practice. And I think that came from talking to the learners in the class and discussing their experiences rather than from me modelling a lesson using moving image.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks very much, Chiara. We'll come back to you in the group session.
Great,
Mel, can I bring you on next?
Mm-hmm.
So,
hi, everyone.
Melanie Kelesh is Deputy Head Teacher at Muirfield Primary School in Arbroath, up in the northeast of Scotland. You were formerly Principal Teacher and Class Teacher at Maison Dieu Primary School in Brechin, and you were involved in a council-wide film education development in Angus during the late noughties, I suppose we would call them. So, well, questions for you then. So the history. Let's start with the history. So, how did it start for you, and how did it go for you?
Absolute serendipity for me. I had just finished my probation, got my first permanent post, as you said, up in Maison Dieu in Brechin, and Brechin had been selected. The Brechin cluster schools had been selected to take part in the Moving Image education pilot project. I think it was just luck that it was there, because the infrastructure was there. There was a film studio, a technical base nearby that was able to support the work that was going on there. So it was just luck that it happened to be the class I was in. The project was supposed to start with primary 6 and then over 4 years roll up to primary 7 into S1 and S2, and I happened to have the P6 class. And we were lucky enough to have, I can't remember what his job title was, whether it was lead practitioner or staff tutor, but certainly we had a member of staff who was seconded to that role full time, who came in and worked with us. We joint planned. He helped us develop our skills in leading analysis discussions with the children, seeing Moving Image as a basis, a stimulus for writing contexts, and a huge amount of support with the technical aspects of it, how to storyboard, how to animate, how to use stop motion techniques, how to film, how to edit, how to put all these things together. And it was a really exciting time as a young teacher. It was an amazing thing to be involved in, and it led on to so many opportunities for work across the cluster and cross-sector, working with the high school as well. So it was fantastic for moderation. And it was one of those things that, you know, as a young teacher, I thought, oh, this is what education is all about. This is what professional learning is all about. So it was a really phenomenal thing to be involved in. And that's kind of always stuck with me. I think the first year was possibly the most exciting and the biggest sort of event. I think we had, at the end of the year, we had like Chiara was saying, an Oscar ceremony in Brechin Town Hall, and all the classes that had been involved came to show their films. And Brian Cox was there as a sort of fairly local celebrity, and we were on STV News, and it was just the most exciting thing for the children ever. So it got off to a great start, and then from there it sort of rolled on from strength to strength. And I think after about 4 years, the project rolled on to different clusters, and then the schools then tried to roll MIE down so that everybody throughout the school was then using film across learning. And I think there was a parallel project in nursery as well. I remember our nursery children making fantastic little animations and using that as a brilliant transition project. And I think that the legacy of that really has been the analysis. I think I would say the opposite to Chiara. I think we've kept those analysis skills going. I think the creative side has suffered a wee bit because we haven't had the tech support that was there initially with the funding from the original project, and that's been really sad for us. So since then, having moved on from Maison Dieu, I'm now in a different school in Arbroath, and Moving Image is still very strong with us. It's something that I've sort of brought with me and introduced. It had quite a high profile in Angus at one point, so it's always been there. It's always been in the background. But that's something we expect the teachers to be able to. We're expecting that that's part of their repertoire in school, that they're able to use film to enable those discussions. And as has already been said, it's the critical analysis part of it that's really important for us, that children are able to express those critical thoughts and develop their reading skills through those texts that are accessible to everybody.
Yeah, great, thanks. And as you know, kind of deputy head in Maison Dieu and Muirfield, what how have you tried to support the development of teachers and new teachers as they come to use moving image education?
Yeah, we include it in our yearly CLPL calendar every year. There's a small group of techniques and pedagogies that we expect all teachers to be au fait with. So every year we offer input on that to all teachers, and we actually open that up in non-COVID years to teachers from other nearby schools as well. So if they're interested, they're able to come along and do a little bit. It's usually me that leads it. And unfortunately, it is very limited to the reading aspect of it. We're not quite where I would like us to be in terms of creative. But it is something that we do offer and we do encourage.
Great, yes. We'll maybe come back to that later. And what outcomes have you seen for the pupils and for the teachers and for the schools you work in?
I think for the teachers, it's one more tool in their arsenal. And I think, you know, Chiara put it perfectly in terms of being able to have a reading session with children of all ages and all stages who perhaps for whatever reason can't decode a written text as well as you might like, but are still very capable of really quite sophisticated analysis, whether that's because, you know, their reading skills aren't up to scratch, there's perhaps a barrier to learning there like dyslexia, or it might be just that they're very young children. I think in our school we're particularly strong in using moving images with younger children in primary 1 and primary 2, because we're developing those reading skills before children have even learned their you know, initial sounds. So I think that's a really important tool for teachers to have. For children, again, it's access to those elements of the curriculum without that need to decode. It gives them confidence, it gives them an awareness of the world around us. And for me personally, especially in this day and age, I think it's the critical analysis skills that are so important. Children need to know when they're being manipulated and how they're being manipulated. And in these days of fake news, then the critical analysis skills are something that we really, as a profession, as a community, as a country, we need to make sure that our children are leaving schools strong in these skills.
And has it figured at all in inspection visits, or alternatively, you know, you're kind of leading it in your school, and you're opening up those CLPL sessions to neighbouring schools. Are you seeing that kind of development in other schools?
Yeah, I would say so. I do generally manage to get out and about in schools in non-COVID years, and I do see a lot of it MIE going on. Less creative, if I'm honest, although there are some schools that are doing very well with that, where they've bought in green screens and they're creating moving images, and they're heavily involved in that. But I do see a lot of the analysis in across our school and across other schools as well.
Great. Okay. And the inspectors, have they visited and noticed?
No, they inspected Maison Dieu quite a few years after I left, and they did Muirfield quite a few years before I started, although we are red hot, so I'll let you know.
Okay, all right. Thanks a lot, Mel. Can I bring Hannah in now, please?
Hello.
Hello, Hannah. Hello. Great to see you, and thanks for coming. So Hannah is a primary teacher at Broom House in Edinburgh, and it's a ward where 35% of children are living in poverty and violent crime rates are significantly higher. Hannah's been using film in the classroom for many years across several local authorities, but you also worked as film education officer for Screen Scotland with me. So you've seen it from that side of the fence too.
Yeah.
You said that you're particularly concerned with how to engage and include children with social, emotional and behavioural needs within mainstream settings. and you're currently focusing on that in the postgraduate degree you're doing in collaborative working, education and therapy. So the same history questions for you, Hannah. Where and how did it start for you? Why did it start? And how have you developed it since?
Well, I think, like the other two said, it started in my probation year. I had walked into a classroom, a primary 5 class, and I'd inherited these kind of old flip cameras that are, were not in use anymore, but I'd inherited loads of them, and they were just sitting in the back of the room, and I thought, I could use them for something. Started off with a bit of photography, and then the kids really got into it. So as I say, it started more the practical side of it. And because the kids were so interested in it, I decided to find, okay, well, I don't really know how to teach it. So I found Into Film. And for me, they were really great at kind of engaging me and kind of teaching me the basics of how to start, teaching film in the classroom. And I started with like a film text and a film study, and it was Harry Potter because the kids were really into it at the time. And I still am. And we started with that, but I wasn't allowed, I think it was Chiara that was saying, I wasn't allowed to show the film either, unless the only way I could get around it was if it was, if I was doing some sort of lesson on it. And I thought, okay, well, that's going to be really great. I started then analysing the film with them and doing a text study that way. And then from that, the kids got really into it so much that I started a film club, and we created like our own film festival. And I think seeing the engagement from the kids in those kind of early days, that kind of just kind of encouraged me to do more. I think that's probably how I started out.
And how's that developed over the years? You've been through several schools. Give us a picture of how that kind of worked.
I think that for me now, as I know more about film education, I kind of focus more on the kind of literacy skills or the reading skills of it all, and reading the film. And the creative side does come, but for example, for me, I embed moving image education in my weekly timetable, so there is a slot for it, and it's it's on my timetable for reading film, and it's really great for getting those kids that, like Melanie was saying, those critical analysis skills. With some of the kids that can't quite engage with a written text, but yeah, they're able to then show these amazing comprehension skills with a film text. So I do embed it in my weekly timetable, and I think as well, we do quite a lot of cooperative learning, and I find that when we do the creative side of it, when we're making the film, it's kind of developing those creative cooperative learning skills as well. So it's kind of such an amazing, moving image education is so good for so many things. It's like an IDL tool, and at the moment, this year in particular, over lockdown, I found it really useful for health and well-being. I was sending them short clips from the film Inside Out, and we were looking at the zones of regulation, and that's something that the rest of our school are continuing to use now. And I know a lot of schools have been using Inside Out, and I think Chiara was mentioning as well how she was using film for doing World War II topics. I found that archive film has been really useful for that as well, and it was like you were saying, Chiara, it was making it real for the kids, because so often when you give them a textbook and say this happened, or you look at the photos, when you actually show them archive film and show them things that had happened in the past, it's like for them to, it's almost like they have a kid that goes, oh, that actually happened, oh, those are real people. Helps them make connections. And yeah, I think that's how it's kind of evolved for me. As I say, started off with the making because I had the stuff. The more informed I got, kind of reading the film, and now I'm just finding ways to make it link with other areas of the curriculum as well.
And what sorts of outcomes have you seen with the children that you work with?
Definitely an increased engagement. I've kind of taught in schools where, in quite deprived areas where kids, quite often, a lot of the kids I'm teaching aren't really engaged with the traditional novels. Obviously, I have a small pocket that are really into it, but quite a lot of my kids don't. And you say, we're going to do reading now, and their faces just trip, But by showing them like a film text and go, we're going to do reading, and then suddenly I'm showing them a short film and we're developing those skills, they don't see it as actual work. And that was, as I said earlier, lockdown was a struggle. I started with, because I had been working with you, Scott, as film education officer, and then I started this new job, and then 2 weeks in at school, and then 2 weeks later we were on lockdown. So I'd only known those kids for 2 weeks, and suddenly I was tasked with setting them home learning, and I didn't really know them. I didn't know their strengths or their interests at that point. So I had to try and think of ways to keep them engaged online, and I found that film was the number one driver for them that actually got them to do anything. It was hard for them to submit anything, but if I asked them to do a film task, I got a response. And I think coming back, they were all showing me the stuff that they've been doing. It was clear that they had been doing the work on film. Were they doing the math stuff? Maybe not, but they were doing the film literacy tasks. And I think I had a pupil who, his mum was really concerned over this past year. She was really concerned about him because, he was really struggling to engage in a lot of the tasks that, when she was reading with him, she was trying to encourage conversations with him about the text he was reading, and he was struggling. His confidence was lacking. But I said to her, I was like, look, you can ask him these similar questions, but with a film text. And I showed the parent how to do that. And she says that the engagement and the conversation she's having at home are, they're a lot more rich than they were before. And, his confidence has definitely improved. He is now showing as his comprehension skills are through the roof. Yes, he needs some more support with fluency, but his comprehension skills are through the roof, but that's helping him with his confidence. So yeah, I can definitely see a difference in engagement and confidence and motivation in my pupils.
That's really, really interesting what you say about working with the parents. I'm sure that's happened, been the experience of some others too. Have you seen, have you been able to sort of pass your experience and skills on to other colleagues, and or have you seen greater interest in moving image education amongst colleagues?
Do you know, I've got the staff I'm working with at the moment, they're already really quite strong in film education. I would say more so on the creative side, like filmmaking, as opposed to seeing it as a film text. And I've managed to convert my stage partner a little more into that. And she's now using film as a text. But I'd say creatively, they're all making films with their kids. And, they're often sharing it using QR codes with the rest of us. And I think as well, this kind of year has kind of upskilled a lot of the staff in our school. And they've come back super confident in technology because we've all had to adapt this past year. And we're seeing that just in the past term, the kids are walking around going, because obviously we can't engage with other classes, but they're quickly dropping off a QR code saying, check out our work, because obviously we want to share what everyone's doing. And it's been useful for my primary sevens to kind of engage with their buddies. They can just pass on a QR code and say, scan that and see the film we've made for you. And the P1s are doing the same. So it's kind of, I think, this year in particular has kind of shown, the creativity of teachers, and it's been really interesting to see. There's actually a teacher in Edinburgh, Blair Minchin. He's got quite a following on social media, and he's been posting quite recently, actually, quite a lot about film education. And I'm seeing so many more teachers just jumping on it and going, oh, great, how can I, how can I use this in my classroom? And it's great to see this dialogue opening up between teachers. But yeah, and I think it's really lucky where I am as well, because our technology is great. We've got I've got about 20 odd iPads for my class. So, there's so much we can do. Yeah, it's been really lucky.
What can you do with an iPad? Not everybody might know.
Well, you were mentioning green screens earlier. We've got green screen in our school, DIY makeshift one, but you can, use that for anything. Our primary threes, they just made a film about climate change. And after they had, they did a lot of protests throughout the school, and our primary threes, they had used the green screen to kind of and they did it all by themselves to show backdrops of protests around the world and to highlight different areas. And they had the little news reporters, areas around the world that are affected by climate change, and they edited it all together using iMovie. Oh no, they use using clips to edit all together. So, and then they were able to then share that with other classes. But I know in other schools, they can use, if they've got Glow logins, they can access archive film, which I have done with other classes. They can use archive film from Scotland on Screen. And they can use all that to collate, because we were mentioning earlier about World War II, when you were looking at all these old footage from Scotland back in the 30s and 40s. You can look at these old films and they can collate, put them all together, because you can download them on there. And it's, there's actually just so much you can do. I was talking to my sister-in-law. She's a teacher in Stirling, and she was using her iPads for AR to show like little dinosaurs in the garden, because her primary ones were just studying dinosaurs. So she had dinosaurs projected out, and she was having the kids interact with them. And for them, it kind of sparked their imagination and helped them with their writing beyond that as well. So there's just so much you can do, but there's so many places. I don't think a lot of teachers know, although they've got all these tools at their disposal, they don't know where to go to then get that extra bit of help to kind of take it to that next level. I think that's what I've heard from one of my colleagues.
Right. Okay. No, that's really interesting. I'm going to come back to you about that climate change film, by the way, but we'll pick that up another time. Okay. Thanks ever so much, Hannah. We'll move on to Greg now, if we may. So, Greg.
Yes, Scott.
Hello. So, Greg, you're a head teacher at Gracemount Primary in Edinburgh. It's the largest positive action school in Edinburgh, with the highest number of children living in poverty in SIMD 1 and 2. For those of you who don't know that, that's the Scottish Index for Multiple Deprivation, and numbers 1 and 2 are the most deprived areas. Greg's been a head teacher of 3 schools and a deputy head in 1 school, and he's taught in several schools in Edinburgh and New York as well. So, Greg, let's do that history stuff first. Let us know where it started for you and why it started, and how you've developed it over the years since.
So, Scott, I've just added up. I've been teaching for 27 years. Well, these guys were talking earlier on, and so it must have been my second year of teaching. I got into making some movies, public broadcast movies. Charlie Says, that sort of thing. And I had a primary 7 at the time that we were doing all about keeping ourselves safe and feeling yes, feeling no, as it was called in those days. And I got the kids to make a variety of films they come up with that could hopefully be a lesson to younger kids. So we made a film about not going in a fridge, about not eating tablets, sweets that you might find in the street. And they storyboarded them, and primary 7 had an absolute whale of a time working out how to vomit on camera using a mixture of cornflakes and Rice Krispies, and so there's a common thread around what we've all said so far is about engagement with kids, and it was one of the highlights of primary 7's career, was making these films. So I worked in groups. We used a camera. School didn't have one. I borrowed one from the Southside Resource Centre in Edinburgh, a community centre, and it was that big. So it was huge. It was I think it was called a Panasonic M9. Sat on a kid's shoulder. Another kid had to really hold it for them because it weighed them down a little bit. And editing movies, obviously, you could edit in camera, which is what is an easy thing to do. And you had all your storyboard and your script ready, but of course you made a mistake, and then you tried to rewind back. If you're editing camera, it doesn't quite work. But we got an editing suite delivered to school, which took up the whole side of my classroom. So the editing suite was delivered in a Ford Transit van, and lovely fellows in the audiovisual unit in Edinburgh set it up. Took them about half a day to set it up and give me a lesson on how to edit. It involved splicing bits of tape together, which is amazing. So I got hooked not on producing content, but I got hooked on the way that the kids reacted to that. The Film House offered, with my video that I've made, to premiere it for us. Subsequently, in schools I've worked in, we've done our own premieres. Halls, most primary schools now have a projector and a little connection, and I can show a movie to 400 kids, 600 kids if we squeeze them into our school hall. But going to the Film House was an amazing event, and we premiered our personal safety film. So that was a long time ago, Scott, maybe 25 years ago, and me and a group of young teachers, we loved doing this stuff, and it was about that creativity and that passion that it was creating amongst our kids. And I then did a Scott Vec in video production, which was really good fun, with a whole lot of different people, and we took it from there. So that was a long time ago. But what's interesting, Hannah was talking about iPads, for example, or even my phone sitting in front of me. The capability of our phone, that camera that hurt the kids' shoulders, and that editing suite that was on the side of that room is now all contained in one little phone, and that is amazing. And just whether it's an iPad, whether it's another type of platform, I'm not selling anything by Apple. What's amazing for schools now. So Hannah's saying she's got 20 iPads in her class. We're looking in Edinburgh now, and other local authorities have done this, of having one-to-one in primary 6 and 7, and just biting the bullet and saying to the kids they can take these home. And then it becomes a really interesting scenario. The kids will be taking these devices home, bringing them to school, and potentially producing content, after the work that we've done in school, and potentially getting hooked on that sort of stuff. So that's really exciting. So that was 25 years ago, Scott. Since then, as a class teacher and a leader, I've been involved in a variety of things. Just sharing my knowledge with teachers. I worked, did some work, with you, Scott, as one of the lead practitioners, working in over the local authorities as well, just doing some projects and training up different teachers. One of the most notable things that I did, if you don't mind me sharing a wee story, was just a Comenius project, so European funded project. Mr. Comenius, I think, was a Polish monk, just about trying to get countries together. It's all about European understanding. It's a shame we're not really able to access Comenius anymore, because I think it's never been more needed. But I was involved in a project with 5 other schools, one from Estonia, one from Italy, one from Malta, and one from Spain, and then there was us from Scotland. And if you want to get involved in this Comenius project, you had a contact seminar, and you pitch for a project, and we pitched for a folk telling movie making project, and it was trying to get different countries to share their local tales via animation and live action, and that was brilliant. So I was involved in an international movie making project with all these countries, and visited all these countries, and ran a movie making workshop, an animation making workshop in a school in Milan with a whole lot of Scottish teachers, which was absolutely brilliant, and really helped me improve my Italian. So I've been involved as a practitioner and also as a head teacher, trying to empower teachers to have these skills and make sure that teachers are aware of the freedoms that they have in terms of the curriculum to take moving image forward. I'll stop there, Scott. Okay.
No, great. Thanks, Greg. And just as a kind of school leader in three, 4 schools, how have you used? We were talking before this session about the kind of different ways, different functions, as it were, for moving image education. You've used what you've used it for as a school leader. Tell us about that.
So you know, everyone has talked about motivation, everyone's talked about inclusion, everyone's talked about engagement with the kids. And for me, that is the biggest seller, particularly working in a positive action school. Hannah's articulated very well some of the demands of children that find accessing the curriculum quite hard, and it's a really good way, it's a really good in for all learners. And at the moment, it's really interesting that moving image education is not something that I'm prioritizing in my school, but everywhere I look, I've been at Gracemount now for 7 years, everywhere I look, it's going on. And it's interesting because I've stepped back a little bit from promoting, just because we were inspected a couple of years ago. I know you'll ask me a question about that. And there was some recommendations from our inspection. And as a leader, I'm concentrating on lots of different things, particularly at the moment, juggling lots of different things. But it's going on, you know, so much in my school. But as a leader, one of the ways that, you know, in terms of getting head teachers involved, it's a great way to sell your school. So, you know, we talk about propaganda, we talk about kids having critical thinking and be able to, you know, see what they see and understand that it might not be, you know, all it's led to believe. But I use the content that is produced by a variety of stages in my school to share that practice with my parents, using a variety of platforms, using our school website, using YouTube, and using Facebook. And it's a great way to sell a lot of the achievements of your school. Currently, at the moment, my primary ones are, I just about to move up to primary 2, but my primary ones have made a film, a guide to primary 1 for nursery kids. Nursery kids cannot have transition in school. They can't come for visits at the moment, which is really hard. It's not what we normally do. So we had a nursery transition day in the playground last Friday, and it was brilliant. But my primary ones have made a film, a warts and all film about our school that they can show to the nursery kids, and that's, you know, hosted on our Facebook and our school YouTube channel. And obviously, say warts and all, not many warts. It's showing a really positive aspect of our school.
Great, thanks ever so much, Greg. Okay, if we can bring everybody in now, and we'll have a bit more, a bit of a kind of wider discussion together. So can I? Is everybody in gallery view now? Yeah, great. Okay. The first question I wanted to ask was about the kind of was what have you learned? You know, what are the key learning points for you? You've all touched on some of those already, but is there anything else you would want to kind of point to that you've learned about film education over the years? Who would like to start us off? Go on.
If there's a silence, I'll always try and fill it, Scott. Do you know one of the things I've learned, and these guys are much more articulate talking about critical skills thinking and other things than me, but one of the things I've learned in encouraging staff to use moving image education is how terrified some people are of technology, how terrified some people are. And I had one teacher, part of this international filmmaking project, and I helped her make a wee film about her grandson that she then posted to her relatives in New Zealand or Australia, and she was hooked on making film on content, and she was terrified before. And as leaders, we know that it's about coaching, it's about standing alongside and supporting people, and that's a big lesson for me in terms of taking things forward for any development, is making sure that the staff are confident using it but feel supported using stuff.
Yeah. I think slightly different to that. I think for me, it's more how I deliver it. A few years ago, I had this amazing idea to do to make music videos and analyze music videos, and let's create these music videos, and it was all going to be part of our big assembly. And you know, I had put down in my plan all these like plans I had for film education, but I didn't. But then at the very end of it all, I edited the film. I put it all together myself, and then I showed it to parents, and it was all amazing, and everyone was applauding it, going, "Aren't these kids amazing? Isn't this fantastic?" And it was one of the kids, and I was sitting there thinking, "Yeah, this is great. You guys have got this. This is amazing." And then it was one of the kids who came up to me and he was like, will we ever get a chance to make the film? And I was like, but you did. I was like, you didn't make the film, did you? But I you know, it was such an easy mistake to make. And I'll never forget that kid's voice saying like, are we going to get a chance to make a film soon? So even though he had actually held the camera, even though they had done the storyboards, they had been in it, for him, he still didn't accept the fact that he had, you know, he did not make that film because he wasn't part of the editing process. He wasn't there for that. And fair enough. So I think for me, it's helping them to see the full process. I think I'll never make that mistake again.
Yeah, no, that's a really, really interesting, good, well-made point. Yeah, so much about understanding how understanding film is in the edit, isn't it? It's not in the camera. It's in the edit. It's really important. So it's really important that they get an opportunity to do that. But there's a caveat, isn't there? Which is that editing takes ages, and it's not something a whole class can do together, is it? Unless they're making little bits. Has any of you kind of done that kind of thing? No response just yet, but okay, let's move on.
I was just going to say, I've not done something where they individually edited things and then put it all together to make one big thing, but I have let them. They have edited their own videos that they made. I think it was around health and well-being. It was like they all had different themes, like anti-smoking, anti-drinking, things like that. And I think sort of what Hannah was saying there, as the adult and the teacher, you always want it to look perfect and to be brilliant. So it's really hard sometimes to take that step back and just let them go with it. It is a learning point from them, but it's quite difficult when you see sort of maybe a finished thing and it's transitions everywhere and things flashing about. But it is a learning experience, and you should really have that critical discussion about, well, is this the best way to have? Did you really need 25 transitions between each scene and things like that? But I think especially like Hannah was saying, if it's an event and you're showing the videos, it takes a lot of courage as the teacher to completely hand it over to the learners.
Just building on that, we recently did stop motion animations with my class, and it was all part of the whole moving on up thing with Edinburgh Council have building resilience stuff, and then it was all about being brave, and they could do anything they wanted about being brave. And I didn't really give them much input on it because we've done a lot of stuff at the start of the term, and I was kind of seeing how much they'd actually remembered about stop motion. So I kind of let them go for it. And it took everything in me not to stop them at points and go, do something else, do change this and do that. And have you thought about doing this? Because what I did was at the end, I let them in. We did a screening and they watched all their films. And I just listened to their conversations afterwards when they were giving each other feedback. And one of the kids was like, "Oh, we should have taken more shots. Like we've only done like 5 shots, and just all like it's like strobe lights." And I was like, But he needed to experience that. He needed to experience the mistakes and go, oh, okay, that's why I do differently next time. But like you say, Kiara, it's so, especially when you're presenting it, it's so hard to take a step back sometimes.
Great, thanks, Hannah. Melanie, do.
I was just going to say, I remember once sharing a class. It was a primary 4 class that I shared with the probationer, and I had the science topics. So in my wisdom, I decided that I would use the film education project for me for that year would be based on the science, and they had to do the digestive system. So in groups, very cooperative learning, they worked in groups of, I think, 4, and they storyboarded the explanation text, and it had the working title of The Story of Poo, which was lovely. But the children had an absolute blast animating the story of the food going down into the stomach and traveling through the body. And then there was flushing toilets at the end and all sorts of things with sound effects that they wanted to put on. And the value of doing that was because they were working in such small groups. they had to do the whole process together, and they really had to have a real understanding of the topic, because they had to explain it to somebody else, and there was nobody else to rely on in a way that wouldn't have been there if they were just writing it themselves. They would have kind of got bored halfway through and just went, and that's the end. But they had to create the whole thing themselves, and they really enjoyed it. I wasn't quite brave enough to have a whole school showing of those. We just watched them in class, because they were very rough and ready. But for every child to be able to edit it meant they had overview and ownership of the whole project rather than a one class film. So it was a really enjoyable thing to do. We've done similar things. I can't remember whether it was Hannah or Chiara said about World War II. We're downloading images, and I think we did, I don't think we did Jacobites, but I think we did Picts, downloading images and putting those together in a montage, because at that point we were lucky enough to have so many IMAX in school that you were able to pull them together for a wee block, so you could have the IMAX in your classroom for 6 weeks, and you could have a wee editing studio going on, and that could be your sort of main focus for learning, and kids could come in at lunch times and edit wee bits and pieces. So it is doable. You don't get quite the fanfare of a big Oscars at the end of it, because the product is always a bit rougher, but the process was really valuable for the children.
Great,
Scott,
thanks. Yeah,
it's worth just stressing again, whether we've had IMAX in our classroom or iPads, the potential, if we can go to one-to-one, the potential, the difficulty we had of some kids editing and other kids not editing is trying to share resources, and, flip cameras or old-fashioned cameras or brand new cameras not having enough stuff. But actually, in terms of making content, if we move towards every child having their own device, which won't happen overnight and won't happen every class, then there's much easier for kids to have ownership, isn't it?
That's a really interesting point, Greg, and that maybe leads on to the next kind of question. You've all sketched out kind of very positive histories and contexts for moving image education in your situations. What do you think are the key challenges and blockages now for further development of moving image education, both in your own contexts and other contexts that you may know about in the educational system across Scotland? So what are the key challenges and blockages now, and then potentially for future development? Mel, I know we talked about this question before, and you were talking about some of the kind of IT issues, which are a perennial issue for many teachers. Yeah,
they definitely are in my context. We were so lucky with the Scottish Screen Supported project at the start. The IMAX that we had were excellent quality, the cameras were excellent quality, and as they sort of came to the end of their natural life, it was really disappointing for us, because we weren't able to connect them to the school systems, we weren't able to update them, and they became so glitchy and so difficult to use that we ended up not actually being able to make films. And there was nothing at that time that was quite so flexible as to be what we needed at that point. And I think now, as Greg says, when we have devices in our own hands that are so powerful, there's almost no excuse for not being able to use technology of that caliber in schools. But the way technology is set up in the authority can be quite difficult. We have far more Chromebooks than we do iPads, and it's very difficult. If anybody is a technical whiz and knows how to do animation type stuff on Chromebook, please come and tell me, because I can't figure out how to do anything of that sort of nature there at all. We've got some people who are doing fantastic little brush ninja animations, and to me that's about as much filmmaking as we're managing to do at the moment on the Chromebooks. And even when we do have access to iPads, because of the way they're set up, they have to be any app that is downloaded has to be approved by the council. So we have to put in a request that gets sanctioned somewhere in Forfar. Somebody has to click a button and add these to a central bank of apps that we can then download it, and then the physical process of loading it onto the iPad has to happen. So it can be, it can be months to get an app on the iPad, and it is a real source of frustration. And we certainly wouldn't be in a position where we could have a whole class set of iPads. I think we've got one per class, one new one per class at the moment. We do have some children who've got iPads as a result of lockdown, but again, that's few and far between. Most of them have Chromebooks. So we're certainly not in a position like Hannah where we've got a class set of 20 that we could, crack on with that. But that's something that I think we need to look at in terms of making that easier for ourselves and more accessible, and then putting in the training to support that.
Thanks, Mel.
Interrupt, Scott. Just been a query from our captioning colleagues, just if it would be possible just to ask our fantastic panelists just to slow down just a little bit, just having a little bit of trouble keeping up with the speed of conversation, if that were possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Okay, thanks very much, Mel. Blockages and challenges then, Greg.
Do you know, Hannah talked about her kids not seeming like real work, which was, engaging them. And Chiara talked about just the willingness sometimes of some of the outcomes, and confidence of teachers using moving image as a potential blocker. So, we're all enthusiasts. I'm not entirely convinced all head teachers are enthusiasts, and all head teachers don't necessarily see the potential of moving image education in the class. You then have a situation where teachers are being brave and trying to sneak things in and educate their head teacher. These guys will tell you they've got head teachers that are supporting what they're doing. So that's a potential blockage. There's still plenty of teachers that probably, and head teachers that probably don't think that it's not real work.
Thanks, Greg. Hannah? Chiara?
I would disagree with what Melanie was saying about the technology. And my authority, they've gone with Chromebooks as well. And our iPads are even older than the ones in your school, Melanie. We have one per class, but they're old to the point where the software isn't updated anymore. And when they stop working, I don't know what we will use to be creative. I think a lot of teachers are using their own devices at the moment, which obviously then doesn't help the children. So I would say that's a bit of a barrier, just down to a choice of technology, which is quite sad.
Yeah. Hannah, do you want to come in on any additional kind of blockages or things that we need to look out for?
To be honest, I think the things that I've experienced have already been mentioned. I'm lucky now that I've got the technology that I do, but in previous school I didn't. As I say, in my first school we only had like the flip cameras, I think that's what they're called, and we only had like one trolley of netbooks that would get pulled out, so obviously it's the inconsistency in different local authorities, and even within the same authority you'll have differences, and I think that can be tricky.
Yeah. And so leading on from that, my next question is about kind of what do you and what do other teachers and head teachers and local authorities and regional improvement collaboratives, what do they need to develop this wonderful thing called moving image education? What do they need? Chiara, can I come to you first as since you're actually, leading literacy in a collaborative?
I was going to say we need you, Scott. And as well, as you know, because you have agreed to this, in our regional improvement area, we are going to be lucky enough to be working with yourself and Gail, who will be delivering a series of moving image education sessions for us. And I'm really hoping that by spreading the word, we will have more practitioners making use of moving image education, because we will be upskilling them and building their confidence and providing them with support to use that in their setting. So I'm very excited about the potential of that moving
Great.
forward.
Do you sense that there's an appetite across the collaborative, or are local authorities kind of different in their attitudes?
I think each authority is different, but broadly speaking, in terms of literacy, their priorities are very similar. I think the knowledge and experience will differ even between schools in the same authority. But I think I know that there are already quite a few primary practitioners keen to find out more about moving image. So hopefully once everyone's rested after the summer and ready to fill their brains with new knowledge, we will get cracking with that.
Great, yes, I look forward to that very much. Hannah, what about yourself?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think sharing of good practice. So just like a platform for everyone to just say, this is what I've done, and this is the impact. This has been great, and this is why. As I mentioned earlier, quite a lot of like teachers new into profession. I know a lot of universities are encouraging their students to create blogs and to go on Teachergram or something and share good practice with practitioners and with colleagues. It would be, and as I mentioned, there are already really good teachers out there showing off their stuff and showing off what they're doing. It'd be really good if there was, somewhere, if that was kind of utilized even more, just so you can grab and go. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times I've saved a post from a colleague from another local authority being like, that's a great idea, I'm going to do that tomorrow. So yeah, I think sharing of good practice would be really great.
This has to be the right moment to talk about GLOW briefly. For those of you who are not in Scottish schools, GLOW is the school's an intranet for the whole school sector. Not all local authorities use it equally, but such is life. And my colleague Gail, who's on this call, has a film education group within Teams, and that is a place where practitioners like yourselves and many others can do exactly what Hannah's been talking about, which is to share that practice. And we would urge all of you who are interested in moving image education to join that group and share your experience and knowledge and support each other, because you're absolutely right, Hannah. It's clear from what we've heard from all of you today that there's a huge amount of experience in this room, this virtual room, and drawing that together and supporting colleagues in that way is absolutely what we need. Greg, Melanie, I don't know if you want to add anything there.
I'm so sorry, can I just build on that, Scott?
Yeah.
But it's not just finding out what the teachers are doing, but finding out, I know Greg mentioned earlier about lead practitioners, finding out what they have been doing. I'm looking at the participants list and I'm seeing some really great lead practitioners in that list who have done amazing things. And with, even in Edinburgh Council, doing some great things in the council. But I spoke to my colleagues about it saying, I was actually on did you know that you could have done like this through the film house, and you could have done this, and it's all linked in with the council as well. Did you know that course was running? And they were like, no, they had no idea. So even, finding out, it's not just about teachers sharing those good practice, but finding a way to find out about all these other networks and all these amazing practitioners and what they're doing as well, because I know they're not able to access GLOW.
Yeah, that's true. We're hoping. Yeah, no, just a quick advert for the fact that we're hoping to be able to include more of those kind of lead practitioners and that kind of material within that group in future. And absolutely use that group to promote what those organisations that you've mentioned and others and freelance lead practitioners are able to offer and the stuff that they're doing. And I know Gail's working a lot on that at the moment. Greg and Mel, did you want to come in on anything that that's needed.
Scott, can I just talk about the significance that lockdown has had on teachers? So, March the 20th, 2020 was when we marched our primary sevens out to a bagpiper, and my staff very quickly learnt a whole new set of skills. So in our school, we delivered our lessons by learning journals. They weren't live. Everything was filmed. There were lots of films that teachers made in a variety of places. They all made, everyone in our school used iMovie. All the teachers, some had used it before, some hadn't. They all did their maths lessons and health and well-being lessons using iMovie, and then posted the movie. So amazing skills that our profession has gained in a short period of time. So there's a real incentive to grab people now. So in primary schools we always talk about making play-based learning, and for me making a movie is play-based learning, and then we learn from our mistakes, and then we do all the stuff about inference and theory and critical skills. But primary ones, primary twos love making movies, but we've got a lot of talented and skilled staff now who are used to making movies, which is amazing.
Oh, great. Mel, did you want to add anything about the needs?
I don't think so. I think everyone said everything I would want to say. I think the networking aspect of it is so important. And I've just joined the Teams page, and I'm loving the Friday film sections. And I get really disappointed when it's film I've already used. And I love it when it's a new one, because it's such a great way for everybody to stay in touch. So promoting things like that, and I think it was Hannah that said about connecting into the wider work of people who are not in education as well. I think these are huge opportunities that we should be taking more advantage of.
Great, thanks very much, Mel. So we're at 15:15 now, and we have to finish punctually at 5:30. So I'm just wondering if we could come to some questions from the floor, so to speak. First question comes from Tim Flood, whom some of you will know. He says, to all panelists, with so much experience, how have you been able to find new moving image education texts, or do you have a bank of favourites that you keep returning to? So who wants to pick that one up first? Right, I'm going to pick on you, Hannah. Go on.
Just thinking about that. I definitely I do change it up quite regularly, to be honest. It's all based on the kids' interests as well. And plus I don't like getting bored myself, just recycling the same thing over and over again. But yeah, if the kids are into trains, I will try and find an appropriate short text about trains. Or if the kids, I kind of do it more like that. And like I find my text sometimes on YouTube, Amazon, Disney Plus, loads of places I try and find just short films. And Disney are really good for their shorts as well. And of course, Scottish Screen as well. Or Screening Shorts, I think it's called, sorry.
Yeah, and that emphasis on short films is interesting too. What about the rest of you, Chiara?
I've used Warhorse, as I mentioned earlier. I've used that a couple of times, just because it was so well received the first time I did it with another class. And same as Hannah, lots of different shorts. I like the Pixar ones quite a lot. Visually, they just look so inviting, and they're usually quite quirky as well. The sense of humour in a lot of them that the children love. But I've also used the Screening Shorts is an excellent resource as well, especially because you have the resources that go along with the short film. And I think new moving image texts come out all the time, so we're spoiled for choice, really.
Yeah, the
ClickView has become
go.
very popular in schools, Scott, particularly around Christmas time. So I've been plugging ClickView with lots of my staff as a place for educational resources and films. And at Christmas, there was loads of Christmas movies on there. So they're all watching Christmas movies in class as well.
Great. Mel?
I use anything and everything, depending on what I'm doing and when. Quite often use feature films. One of my absolute favourites to use is Labyrinth, the old 80s movie with David Bowie in it, because it does such a fantastic job with setting. And if the children haven't seen it, they're completely blown away. They think it's set in a medieval fairy tale setting, and then the girl has to run home and she hikes up her dress and you see she's got jeans on. You realise it's a contemporary setting, and the way the labyrinth mirrors her personality, it's absolutely fantastic. So we'll do things like that. People have said about the Pixar shorts, the BFI films, anything and everything that we can get. Basically, we use Literacy Shed as well to find wee animations, and there are so many beautiful little animations being produced in universities and colleges all over the world that are there to be used. There is an amazing selection out there. Sometimes it's, as somebody said, we're spoiled for choice, and it's having the time to find them and go through them. But I do also really, really like having a bank of old favourites, and especially when I'm asked to cover a class at short notice, it is brilliant to be able to go in and say, right, we're doing this, and you know the children are going to love it, you know you're going to get a really good literacy lesson out of it, and it's never a waste of time. Even as a standoff one alone lesson, to use one of the BFI films is always time well spent developing literacy skills. So a mix of everything.
Great, thanks, Mel. Okay, another question. This comes from Mark Reed at the British Film Institute, whom some of you will also know. Well, he says, hello, everyone. Fond memories of coming up to see great practice in the Brechin Project and in Edinburgh, ! I'm just curious as to whether you've been able to set up or maintain relationships with external film agencies, like the Discovery Film Festival in the old days, or Film House and Edinburgh International Film Festival, or is your moving image work all in school? Who wants to take that on first?
I'll go first. Prior to working with you, Scott, I hadn't engaged with anything. I didn't know, other than into film, I didn't know there was anything else I could have put my kids forward for. I was in East Lothian before I was working with you, and we didn't take part in the Edinburgh International Film Festival or anything like that. But this year, obviously, since I've been back, I know they did do some, like there were some things that they want, they did try and engage with schools and stuff, to get, I think you could have submitted a film during lockdown at one point. It was just really tricky to coordinate, so I wasn't able to do it, unfortunately, but they did reach out. That's all I can say on that one.
And are you going to try and develop those kinds of relationships with Broom House in future?
School, I know that Broom House, they did take part in the Into Film offer for free cinema passes. They did do that every year. I know they were disappointed this year they couldn't do it. So obviously that's one thing they'll be doing definitely in the future. But yeah, I think in the future, I will try and see what else the Edinburgh International Film Festival have on offer for us.
Great. Okay, thanks, Hannah. Greg, Mel?
Scott, in reply to Mark's question, I'm embarrassed to say that over the last few years, I don't think I've kept up those connections. I think there's, not just lockdown. As a busy head teacher, our school undertook an inspection a few years ago. I'll be concentrating the post-inspection action plan. And I think this has reinvigorated me, listening to all these guys about making connections. And I think we've all mentioned in terms of blockages that there's those connections are where we see that we should go. But I've not kept up my connections, and I'm ashamed to say that.
Thanks, Greg. Mel?
In 2019, we were lucky enough to be able to take the whole school to the Discovery Film Festival. So all of us trooped onto buses and went up to the Dundee Contemporary Arts Centre, and the whole school was split across the 2 screens to watch a set of short animations, which were absolutely fantastic. They were so good. They were all chosen on the theme of winter. And because the Discovery Film Festival creates a pack every year of fantastic resources based on the film put together by teachers, I had taken that beforehand and put in some pre-watching activities for the classes to do. And then some follow-up work that all the classes participated in, which we were then able to share throughout the school. Obviously pre-COVID, they were able to bring it to assembly and talk about the literacy work that they had done on the back of that. And because some of the films were accessible in the classroom afterwards online, the teachers were then able to develop it for themselves as well. So it was a really phenomenal experience. The film festival was online last year and some of our teachers did participate, but we did really love the excitement and the enthusiasm and the cultural impact of physically going to the cinema. Was an amazing experience for some of our children some of them had never been to a cinema, and it's something we'd definitely be keen to do again.
Great, thanks, Mel. Chiara?
Really just into film. I think a lot of the possibilities were unknown to me before. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
If you don't know, you don't know. But when I eventually go back to school, I will be looking into that for my setting.
Well, that's something for us to think about how we kind of promote those connections better too. One last question.
Can I just quickly ask? My kids were really excited because I told them about the Scottish Youth Film Festival. They were really excited about it. And I told them, because obviously there was something, I said, oh, it's still going ahead. And this is before I knew the date, really. I was like, it's still going ahead, and they were all like, whoa, does that mean we can submit our films? Can we do this? But I think it was on at a weekend. And the kids I have, quite a lot of them still don't have access to internet at home. So they were, that's kind of a barrier. That was a barrier for them. So they couldn't really take part in it. And moving forward, opportunities like that, it would be really great if it was during school time, especially for schools like mine, for the kids I have, because then we're kind of the people that will be able to take them to these kind of experiences.
Yes.
So that was just something I wanted to say.
No, thank you for that, Hannah. That's really handy. We'll pass that on. One quick final question from Gail. Regarding Chiara's mention of the dying iPads, a lot of teachers have to resort to fundraising to purchase film equipment for their classes and schools. How do you feel about this? Do you think local authorities should be stepping up more in terms of funding film education? Who's going to take that one? Greg, are you brave enough?
I thought you mentioned Chiara there. She was going to come into that. I mean, it's hard because we're all different local authorities, or people different local authorities. Edinburgh is making this one-to-one that we're doing in primary 6 and 7, and I think it's up to 4th year. I could be wrong. Certainly 1st, 2nd, 3rd year in high school. Edinburgh is making us do that. So this is their lessons from lockdown. They're making us have one-to-one. Now, I agree with that, but they're making us do that out of our own budget. So they're saying you must have one-to-one for all your primary 6 and 7s, and you must pay for it. This is how you're going to, take out your school budget somehow. And that's really interesting. So very brave of them to do that. Previously, I mean, my wee boy goes to school in a different area to where I work in, and his school, I'm a dad at that school, they do fundraisers and they get 20,000-30,000 pound at their fundraisers. My primary school, we have a fundraiser and raise 2,000 pound, and we're like, yeah, it's brilliant. So there's real inequity around fundraising, and that's really hard for the likes of my school and Hannah's school. So making schools make those tough decisions and invest in technology is the thing. I'd prefer if the local authority would fund it for us, but I know there's tough decisions by the local authority around funding.
Okay. Well, look, thanks very much. It's getting flagged to me that I need to wrap things up, so I'll do that. But perhaps do Chiara or Mel want to say anything further? Either a yes or a no? No. Okay. So I'm going to pass back now to Jamie in a second to wrap things up completely. But I just want to say thank you ever so much to you for a really rich and wonderful session. Thanks ever so much. And I will see you all anon. Thank you.
I just want to reiterate Scott's thanks. That was a really interesting session from where I was sitting. So much rich experience. So fantastic to hear from you all. Thank you all so much for your time and for sharing your thoughts. And also just to thank our audience, particularly those of you, I've been keeping an eye on the participants over the past 5 sessions, and there are a lot of you who are glutton for punishment in terms of coming back to Zoom session after Zoom session. So thank you all very much indeed to our audience. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to be able to bring together such an international cohort, as my colleague Mark Reed has said in the past, coming from different places but with a shared interest. So thank you all for your time. The Scottish International Film Education Conference will be back again next year. We will be announcing provisional dates soon, so please do put them in your diaries. Final word of thanks to our wonderful captioners, Louisa and Ali, who have been very patiently tapping away in the background over the past 5 sessions. Thank you all so much. And also to our amazing administrator, Flip, for keeping us all afloat and online. Thank you all very much, everybody. I hope you get a well-deserved break over the weekend, and we hope to see you again next year. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.